Jung mapped out two archetypes that explain why some people never truly feel at home anywhere: the orphan and the wanderer. And what he discovered about these souls is so profoundly disturbing that most therapists actually avoid the topic. Because the truth is, some people weren't born to fit in. They were born for something entirely different. And if you're watching this video, chances are you might be one of them. Neuroscience in 2025 has confirmed what Jung intuited a century ago. The pain of not belonging is processed in the same brain regions as physical pain. Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA proved that social exclusion activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, the very same areas that light up when you break a bone. Your brain can't distinguish between being rejected by a group and being physically injured. But here's what no one tells you. For some souls, that pain never stops. No matter how many groups they try to join, no matter how many times they adapt, the feeling of not belonging remains. And Jung discovered why. If you've always felt like you're on the outside, you're into looking in. If you've tried fitting into families and groups, communities, and always felt like something was missing. If you look at the people around you, living their normal lives, guys, and think, how do they do it? This video was made for you, because what I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes isn't just an explanation, it's a transformation. I'm going to show you exactly what Jung discovered about souls who don't belong anywhere. I'll connect it to the latest neuroscience on belonging and exclusion, and I'll give you something that no conventional therapist can offer. A new way to understand why you are the way you are and what that means for your own personal journey. As Andrew Huberman would put it, your exploration of self. But first, you need to understand something fundamental. The search for belonging is so basic to human beings that it's archetypal. Jung wrote extensively about this. We may not be physical orphans in the real world, but many of us feel like we're psychological or emotional orphans. We feel like we're not connected to our family of origin, or the tribe, or culture we were born into. We feel like we're different, as if we don't belong in some fundamental way. That's the Jungian definition of the orphan archetype. It doesn't necessarily mean you've lost your parents. It means you carry within you a fundamental sense of disconnection, of being separate, of being a foreigner in your own world. And this archetype has a very specific function in the individuation process. Jung said that the orphan in fairy tales is always on a journey to find their true place in the world. And most of the time through much trial and false belonging. They have to create a new world for themselves. Do you understand what this means? The orphan doesn't find their place, they create their place. Because no place that already exists was made for them. But wait. Because here's where neuroscience comes in and changes everything. Researchers have discovered that the need to belong is considered the most fundamental of all human needs. A large part of human behavior is motivated by the need to form and maintain social bonds, to feel a desired sense of belonging. And the lack of strong and stable interpersonal relationships is detrimental to both physical and mental health. This means that your brain is literally programmed to seek belonging, and when it doesn't find it, it goes into alarm mode. Studies show that chronic social exclusion causes structural changes in the brain. The cerebellum shows alterations in adolescents who experience prolonged isolation. The large-scale networks that control cognitive and social functions are affected. So say we have a neurological paradox. Your brain needs belonging to function well. But if you carry the orphan archetype, you can never completely satisfy that need. No group seems quite right. No connection feels sufficient. You're constantly searching for something that never quite arrives. And here is where Jung offers something that neuroscience alone can't explain. Jung identified a second archetype that frequently accompanies the orphan, the wanderer, or as it's called in some traditions, the vagabond, the pilgrim, the one who wanders. The wanderer archetype appears as a figure of profound loneliness, who moves through life without a fixed home or direction. restless in the search for purpose and belonging. They have what Jung called far sickness, a deep longing for distant places, and the hope of eventually finding a place on earth where they really feel at home. The wanderer yearns for a home, but doesn't feel at home anywhere. They inhabit a liminal space between past and present, the familiar and the unknown. If this describes you, if you've always had this feeling of being between worlds, of never really arriving, you carry the wanderer archetype. And that's not a curse. It's a calling. But before I explain that calling, I need to show you something that's going to bother you. Most people who carry these archetypes spend their entire lives trying to heal them, trying to find the right group, the right community, the right place, as if the problem is that they haven't yet found where they belong. But what if that's not the problem? What if you weren't made to belong to a place? What if you were made to belong to yourself? Jung wrote something that completely changed my understanding of this topic. He said that, for the seeker of depth, the orphan offers a special kind of promise and a profound magic. If we can sit with that loneliness long enough and stop being tempted to cling to the ego's fantasies of false belonging, a kind of transcendence emerges, where the orphan becomes numinous and whole, and belongs as much to no one as to the entire world simultaneously. Read that again. Belongs as much to no one as to the entire world simultaneously. That's the opposite of what society teaches us. Society says, find your group, find your tribe, belong to something bigger than yourself. But Jung is saying that, for certain souls, the path is exactly the opposite. It's through non-belonging that they find true belonging. Neuroscience can explain this in an interesting way. Researchers at the Catalyst Research Group, studying 250 organizations across 6 countries, discovered that inclusion is a balance between having a sense of belonging and feeling unique. Inclusion means that people feel similar to their colleagues and recognized for their distinct qualities. Do you perceive the paradox? To feel included, you need to feel both equal and different. But for those who carry the orphan archetype, the different part is so dominant that no amount of equal can balance it. And here is the turning point. Instead of trying to diminish your uniqueness to fit into groups, you can completely embrace your difference until it becomes your own territory, your own place, your own home. Jung called this the individuation process. And for the orphan and the wanderer, individuation has a very specific flavor. It begins when you stop seeking external belonging and start building internal belonging. The orphan is called to something higher, and that something higher is facing their own shadow. To do this, they must turn their back on society, because this is a battle that can only be fought alone. Do you understand the radical nature of this? Jung is saying that the cure for not belonging isn't finding where you belong. It's accepting that you don't belong anywhere externally, so you can discover that you belong completely to yourself internally. But this isn't easy, and this is where many people fail. Neuroscience shows that when we are excluded, our brain enters a self-protection mode. People chronically excluded show lower interpersonal trust, prefer greater social distances, and have reduced activation in the limbic and striatal regions during interactions. In other words, the more you don't belong, the harder it becomes to try to belong. Andrew Huberman talks about the importance of social connection for mental and physical health, but also highlights the challenges that arise when these connections are consistently absent. This creates a vicious cycle. You don't belong, so your brain shuts down. Your brain shuts down, so you belong even less. And the cycle continues until you are completely isolated, not by choice, but by defense. Jung saw this happen with many of his patients, people who carried the orphan archetype and tried to solve it the wrong way, trying to belong more, trying to adapt more, trying to be more like others, and each failed attempt only increased the pain. The solution that Jung offered is counterintuitive. He said that solitude becomes the school, in which the person is forced to learn to endure their singularity as an individual. And in fact, this theme provided Jung with the nucleus of his later writings on individuation. You don't overcome not belonging by belonging. You overcome it by learning to inhabit your not belonging consciously, transforming it from a wound into a territory, from a curse, into a gift. And this is where the Jungian concept of the self comes in. The self is not the ego. The ego is the part of you that wants to belong, that wants to be accepted, that suffers with rejection. The self is the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious united. And the self doesn't need to belong to anything external, because it is already complete in itself. When you connect with the self, something magical happens. The pain of not belonging doesn't disappear completely, but it changes in quality. It stops being an open wound and becomes a door to a type of freedom that people who belong easily will never know. Jung wrote that if a man knows more than others, he becomes lonely. But solitude isn't necessarily hostile to company, for no one is more sensitive to company than the solitary man. And company only prospers when each individual remembers their individuality and doesn't identify with others. This is profound. Jung is saying that the best company comes exactly from people who don't need it, who are complete in themselves, who aren't seeking in others what they should find in themselves. And ironically, when you stop needing to belong, you start attracting the right connections, not by need, but by resonance, not by desperation, but by abundance. So how do you do this in practice? How do you transform the orphan archetype from a wound into a gift? First, you need to stop blaming yourself for not belonging. This isn't a failure of yours. It's the configuration of your soul. Some people came to belong to groups. Others came to create new territories. You are the second type. Second, you need to make peace with solitude, not the solitude that hurts, the solitude that transforms. Jung practiced what he called active imagination, deliberate moments of isolation, where he conversed with parts of himself that he normally ignored. This type of solitude isn't empty, it's populated by yourself. Third, you need to build your own internal territory. This means developing values that are yours, not borrowed. Interests that are genuine, not performed. An identity that comes from within, not from without. The more solid this territory, the more comfortable you become, not belonging to external territories. Fourth, you need to learn the difference between isolation and sovereignty. Isolation is when you are alone, because nobody accepts you. Sovereignty is when you are alone, because you chose it. The orphan and the wanderer begin in isolation, but the goal is to arrive at sovereignty. Fifth, you need to find the other orphans, because here is the final paradox. People who don't belong anywhere frequently find belonging in one another, not in organized groups and not in structured communities, but in random encounters, deep conversations, connections that seem to come from another life. Jung called this finding members of the same spiritual tribe. Neuroscience would call it neural synchronization between compatible brains. When two orphans meet, something happens. They recognize each other. They don't need to explain. They don't need to justify. They simply know. And this type of connection is deeper than any group belonging, because it isn't based on external rules. It's based on recognition of souls. So what really happens to your soul when you don't belong anywhere? It suffers. First, because the brain is programmed to seek belonging, and the pain of exclusion is real and physical. It seeks. Afterward, trying to find the right group, the right place, the right people, and frequently failing, it gives up. At some point, on trying to belong in the conventional way. And this is the turning point. It returns to itself. and starts to build an internal home, a territory of its own, an identity that doesn't depend on external validation. It transcends. Finally, the paradox of the orphan, belonging to no one and to the entire world simultaneously. And in this final stage, something interesting happens. The right connections start to appear, not because you were seeking, but because you stopped seeking. And when you stop emanating need, you start emanating presence. And presence attracts presence. If you've made it this far, if you felt that these words touched something that you never managed to name, I want to ask you a favor. YouTube has that golden heart below the video. The super thanks. When you click on it, you aren't just supporting this channel, you're saying that I am one of the orphans and I understood. Continue revealing these truths that nobody else speaks about. Each super thanks is a sign of recognition, an orphan recognizing another. That's precisely what Jung described. Souls that don't belong anywhere, finding belonging in each other, not in groups, not in communities, but in moments of real connection. Now I have a question for you, and I really want you to answer it in the comments. Jung said that the orphan must turn their back on society to face their own shadow. When was the moment that you realized that you didn't belong, that you weren't going to belong, and that maybe you weren't meant to belong? Share your story. It can be a sentence. It can be a paragraph. But be honest, because when you write down your experience of not belonging, something changes. You transform a wound into a declaration, and maybe someone reading your comment will think, for the first time in a long time, I'm not alone in this. And in that moment, two orphans meet. Two souls recognize each other. And the paradox is complete. Belonging to no one and to everything at the same time. That's the secret gift of the orphan. That's the territory the wanderer has been searching for their entire life. And it was inside you the whole time, waiting for you to stop searching outside, so you could find it right here within.